What is it that we want to do? The Foundation's movement, perhaps the greatest advantage the cons and regressives have over us, is that they know what they want. Unlike them, we as progressives and foundationers have an open mind and want to see the facts before making a decision. Their single-minded semi-insanity works well for taking power but not for running a nation. It is my opinion that the cons and regressives will run this nation into a smoking mess, and that we will have a chance at that point to begin again. So what is it that we want? What would we like to see as a way of governance? Where have we gone wrong, and where did the genius of the founders shine? Those are the questions we must ask ourselves.
What is it we want to build? In that vein, let me explain what we could do and what would work. I believe we should begin with the Constitution. The Constitution was designed in 1789 to replace the Articles of Confederation that had created an unworkable, far too weak federal government. Hence the beginning of, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. The idea of the Constitution was to correct the flaws of the prior document. It is not a gift from God as some would say, nor is it perfect, but considering the times and conditions, it is indeed a remarkable document. What I think we must remember is that it was an honest attempt to, within the limitations and norms of American society of 1789, to create a working governmental structure and to do something never done before in human history. Government for and by the people set within the structure of 1789 society. I've heard others question the motives of the founders, that they were slave owners and protected their interests. But between them, they created something that has worked for over 240 years. Not back for a bunch of 18th century dudes with wigs.
Because of communications improvements, the ability to travel at a much higher speed, and advancements in science and technology, what could we accomplish now, and what would in fact work? By the way, I realize that the complexity and length of this piece will turn a lot of people off, but that's actually good. Because the people who respond will be interested and willing to work. So let's begin with the beginning. The Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence is the original founding document. Although it is full of grievances against the Crown and power of England, it is perhaps the most telling of founding documents because it wasn't about the nuts and bolts of governance, it was about the aspirations of a new country founded against what they saw were the transgressions of tyrants. It was also about saying what they would do better. John Romer, once speaking on the lasting power of the Bible, said that it was not in its many times contradictory and confusing words but in its spirit. That all in all, it told us that we are not alone, that our good deeds and honesty would be appreciated, and that we are more than just a smart animals. In many ways the Declaration of Independence and its spirit are much the same in their power. That we the people rule through a consensus of agreement, that all men and by that women are equal as an inalienable right, that government is for and by the people, not through a divine right of kings or the force of arms of a tyrant. That through spreading power into the hands of many and a system of checks and balances a fair system could be built. But all of the systems of government depended on men and women of honor and honesty. As we see now is the time of pay-for-play government, of Joe Manchins and Ted Cruz's, Jim Jordan's and Donald Trump's. The existing system is vulnerable to tsunamis of money and dishonorable intent.
So, I suggest taking the good, the spirit of the founding documents, and removing the vulnerable, the bad, and the unworkable. We begin with the beginning, we the people, not we the rich or we the corporations, or we the white-skinned Americans, but we the people, the totality of America. Continue with the government for and by the people. Again, not for just the rich, or the corporations, or the white-skinned, but for the people, all of the people. We see daily what the tyrants of today want, their rhetoric, their lies, and their myths. Anything to further their cause of tyranny, of racism, of privilege, and of logic and advantage. They have sold the founders down the river for the right home in the right neighborhood, the right car and trophy, wife or husband, and of course perfect kids to show how perfect they are. This has become substituted for our real freedoms, privilege and status, shiny toys, and the approval of others, because you own them, have become real freedoms. The ability to travel, do things, and go places. The pandemic has exposed how this is the life of many, and without their addiction, They become depressed and frustrated. We have become what we can buy as opposed to who we are. A friend of mine once told me that in his neighborhood, the minimum was a BMW 3 Series, a certain exterior look, and the right look for everything. Is that what freedom has become? The things that make you as opposed to the person that you make yourself to be. If that is who we have become, then there is no winning. We will just carry ourselves to our own destruction. The love of things will destroy our love of real freedoms, of truth, logic, ethics, and honesty of intent, the integrity of decision, and ethical action, to be replaced by greedy expediency.
The nation the cons and regressives have built, forced onto us, lured us into, cannot be repaired. With policy and law, if we have sold out to the shiny things of the cons, then nothing will save us in the end. Our addiction to toys and trinkets, the faux status it gives, make us vulnerable to stupid and misinformation. That is only why people like Jim Jordan, Ted Cruz, and Donald Trump gain power over them. So we must begin with ourselves. There is nothing wrong with things fairly earned. It is not the things themselves that are the problem. It is the sense of entitlement, the protection of those things against all that is truthful, logical, ethical that is the problem. If we cannot base our society on those principles, then we have again built upon the shifting quicksand of lies, selfish point of view, arrogance-based superiority, and whatever we can fool ourselves with. We must begin there. What worked 240 plus years ago has been overwhelmed by lies and myth, exploitation of the flaws in the existing system, tsunamis of money targeted to wreck the system, and the evil intent of racists, corporate supremacists, and glory-seeking, self-serving fools. So what can we do? How can we fix this? Given the chance, what would we build? It is the idea that we can't just fix the system, that it will again be attacked, and in our pursuit of things allow this type of disaster to happen again. That the concept of the foundation and the foundation's process began. America is now run by the defenders of the abuse culture. The abuse culture is the process of abusing others for profit and fun. It gave us slavery, segregation, abuse of women and of the poor, and anyone available to abuse. It has given us poll taxes, voter suppression, and abuse of women and racism. White and corporate supremacy. The economy has always lived on the abuse of someone, except during the New Deal. That is why they hate it so much.
What we have no longer works. The cons and regressives would tell us now that they have largely captured the system, that the system is all that counts, whether it works or not. But I say, no, what is important in the spirit of the founding documents, before they were converted into a system, then into prison, like with the Bible, it is the spirit that makes it so powerful, that, under the universe, all men and women are created equally, that divisions of wealth and race do not diminish what someone is valued as a human being, and that value is always the same, that government for, by and in the protection of, the people, all people, as Lincoln told us, shall not fall from this earth, that as human beings we have a balance of rights and responsibilities, always to remain in balance, never to allow narcissist fools to claim more and take away from others, that it is to us to build human beings, and that everything within humanity is that we become, as I have repeated many times, the builders of those that will reach to the stars, but not carry our intelligent animals with them. To do that we must change ourselves. So the kind of government we have really mattered little, for unless we change our identity, it will always end in the flaming heap we seem to be destined to find, the highest cliff to jump from, the most righteous of ignorance to follow.
The process of owning ourselves, the beginning of becoming human beings, and to move away from the intelligent animal, the more primitive a version of who we are. But within all of us, the media is adept at the promotion of the lizard brain, as I call it, being in charge, and the higher functioning human brain is shut off. Or being a zombie, alive but no longer in control. Our existing political system was built to control the worst of our intelligent animal compulsions by the founders. But they never reckoned with such a malignant force as the cons and regressives, bankrolled by the corporate supremacists. That wasn't in their conversation because such a force didn't exist then. But of course, they did have slavery. So as we look to the future, what exactly can we construct? The idea behind the foundations are to provide capital to build a business outside of the control of the cons and the business supremacists. Right now, their control of government is enabled by their control of the economy. Breaking that control must be a top priority. You can't, as we have seen, have a working democracy with an authoritarian economy. That was the genius of the New Deal and its high taxes on the rich. They were able to accumulate the economic power to overcome our democracy through the economic system they were allowed to impose on this nation. the vampire capitalism, or as I call it, the monopoly economy. Its single purpose is control and complete domination, the repeal of any regulation, and protection for Americans, both politically and economically. So whatever we do has to include a rebalancing of the economy, defeating the monopoly economy, their drive to reestablish some sort of segregation, and to load everything in favor of white skin and wealth. The ideals of equality, government for and by the people, run against what they seek to accomplish.
The third leg of their assault on democracy is gutting the free press into an infotainment system, using the Nazis' program of mixing propaganda and entertainment. They accomplish this through ownership of the media. Keeping a stranglehold on the truth puts them in a bad light. So the problem is far more than just the political system, one that was founded with slavery and suppression of women in mind. So, what do we do? What do we build? We begin with a standard. A standard for everything. Truth, logic, ethics, and honesty of intent. We can also include integrity of decisions and ethical action. With those tools and standards, we have the foundational pieces for most things. From the economy to politics, to the media, those 5 standards give us a tool to change things for the better. But they must also have teeth to be effective. So let's now break down the different segments of society that we need to address.
The first is to redefine the damage done in the past 40 years by the cons to the first 2 amendments to the Constitution, namely freedom of speech and the right to bear arms. Both have been redefined to their advantage, that the freedom of speech includes buying it, through their accumulation of wealth, the redistribution of wealth, on a national level. The freedom of speech of the founders was never about money in their eyes, the ability to purchase and define the truth with lies and propaganda, was never the basis for freedom of speech. The speech between us, as individuals, is protected. The speeches in front of a crowd is protected. The buying of focused lies is not. Propaganda is not a protected right of free speech. In fact, the fairness doctrine for television and radio was based on the power of propaganda as seen from the Nazis and communists during and after World War II. Much of Congress were veterans and they had seen firsthand the power of unrestricted propaganda. That was why the fairness doctrine was an early target of the cons. The best way to bring truth back as a standard is to keep the substitution of money for free speech from happening. Sadly, that has become the norm here.
The Second Amendment was never meant to bring about the wholesale arming of the nation, to create the ability of right-wing militias to do much the same as the Taliban here in America. The Second Amendment was about being able to have a gun if you needed it, to hunt or for protection, not to have a man-killer that has only the purpose of killing humans, not for the purpose of intimidation or of suppression of others' rights. The cons are the ones that redefined it into a way for private armies to be armed and ready. This was never the purpose of the amendment.
For the past 40+ years, the cons and regressives have done their best to separate the proxy, the system we now have, from the people. The government is supposed to be for and by. Point 1. Now is the time to see the purpose of their actions as those of authoritarians. That is why I propose direct democracy and the election of policies and laws, the election of Supreme Court justices and the lesser courts also, from a pool of qualified candidates that have a term of 8 years without money being involved. In fact, all elections must meet a national standard that stops gerrymandering and voter suppression. You can see the need for national standards by what has happened since the Civil Rights Act and election protections were gutted by the cons, round after round of states' voter suppression and gerrymandering as an Olympic sport. The cons and Trumpsters have attacked fair voting in every state where the Republicans are in power. It is now time to end the cynical game they are playing, the destruction of fair and equal elections.
There are 2 components of the law: law itself and law enforcement. Both must be enforced equally or injustice reigns. This is the sad truth that Americans with black and brown skin have known for decades. If enforcement is unfair, the whole system is. That is where one of the prime directives, honesty of intent, comes in. The question of their intent becomes one they must be responsible for. So many times the community standard of places has been upheld, not the law. If racism is the community standard, then there is no fairness in the law. Community standard is no substitute for fair law, fair enforcement. But even after the end of segregation, that in many places, is the standard in place? So, it begs the question, how do we make America whole? It begins with us? Sadly. I have to believe that in the end, we will have to leave many behind because they live in a world of righteous ignorance and want nothing of the real world. They live in the world of they are in charge, they will do as they want and screw you. They celebrate the monsters they have built, and will not be swayed by logic or truth. They see that the things they can accumulate as proof they are superior. That power makes right no matter how wrong it all is. That technology makes them smart when it just makes them lazy and complacent.
In the history of mankind, I have to wonder if there has been a nation more adept at shooting themselves in the ass than we are. The monsters that eat at our national soul are the ones we have created, and now, like Dr. Frankenstein's monster, they have come to seek revenge upon us. The enslavement of others for economic gain, their treatment as property, then after forced freedom of sorts, believe them to be less than human because their ancestors were taken by force, enslaved, and oppressed. That women are owned, that marriage is economic, and that it is a kind of slavery, just with the status of marriage, protection from being prey to other men, and the shame of being a victim. Capitalism has been set free to destroy, and it has once held in check. The New Deal, it allowed your parents to own a car, a house, get an education. Now it tears at the fabric of America, with no soul or conscience, just eternal greed and self-serving arrogance. America has always been an abuse-based society. Everything revolved around the white male. That abuse was their role in life, the way of the world. It has been reflected in our laws, our traditions and customs, and of our community standards, police enforcement. They, along with the well-financed and organized regressive movement and propaganda war, have brought us to this point.
I have seen many comparisons to Rome in our situation, but I see Venice as a closer comparison. Once the bad boys of the old world, they ruled the Mediterranean Sea. They were the can-do Americans before they even knew America existed, but they soon became the prisoners of their own wealth, made by their forebearers. While other nations became wealthy and powerful in the New World, they became less and less important. Sadly, I see us on that same path because of the monsters eating our national soul. By the 1700s, there was little more than decadent rot. There was no longer anyone to prey upon but each other, nothing more than money and things. They built palaces and bought jewels, gambled away fortunes, and built tyranny to keep their wealth. It is breathtaking to see how we have gone from explorers and innovators to a new Venice. As I quote from Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead, there are some people that count and others that don't. We are living in a time of the resurgence of decedent tyranny, in a vain attempt to keep what they have taken from those that see as don't count.
It is time to stop defending monsters, building a schizophrenic society based on abuse and myth that somehow is all righteous. Even with a branch of the Christian church, the evangelicals sell out to them for ideological purity. This is the monster that eats us, the illogical, the lies, and the solidarity to those that eat at our nations and our potential. Yet they are righteous in their crusade to wreck all, to gain their illusion. This indeed is the monster, the illusion that eats us, because to them, we don't count. Sadly, in the end, it is my guess that we will have to let them destroy themselves while we move on, for this nation to survive. It's time to stop feeding the monsters, and let them die of starvation while eating the illusion they have built. There is a simple truth here. If we stay the same, we will have doomed ourselves and those yet to come. So it truly does come down to changing ourselves. We are slaves to the infotainment and propaganda industry, as a nation. The indoctrination process of constant election ads, pounded into our brains for months before the election, being played through calculated news shaping. Working the self-protection of the lizard brain of our mind, like a punching bag. We have to become immune to their lies and myth. This is not about being just the opposite version of the cons, it is about changing the momentum of this nation through understanding what it is the cons have done. What they have done is over 40 years change the perception of the nation to one where there is nothing that will work except their way. To make this work, we will have to take what they have done and use it against them. Kind of like judo, use their momentum against them. The Foundations is about using the corporate structure against the corporate structure. Replacing corporate greed with cooperative human-centric capitalism. Capitalism builds human beings, not destroys them. That is our goal, and using the 19 points of the Foundations Codex as our tool. In the end, the greed and lies of the cons and regressives will destroy them. That is how the 2ND economy, outside of the cons' vampire monopoly economy, cutting off their money, will first compete, then replace them. That is how we beat their control of the economy. And with the Foundations giving people a chance to succeed, own themselves, and think for themselves, we defeat them. The Foundations process is there to build individuals into a resilient and powerful, interwoven in purpose structure, while still building independent thinkers and innovation instead of control and abuse of the cons economy. We also do this by not concentrating on how everyone thinks, but encouraging innovation to solve problems. There are a million paths to the same place. We all take our own path but to the same place. In one of my books, I call it the YAR point after a character. But it is all part of the critical path to the goal of a renewed America and renewed democracy.
The third component of the Foundations is the Foundations movement. To use the elections process and the amendment process to reverse all of the damage of the cons and regressives. So now that we have discovered what we don't want, what do we want? Direct democracy to bring government to be as the founding documents tell us, for and by the people. Not being cut off at the pass of money-infected politics, as we are now. The end to voter suppression in the states by the Republicans, cons, and regressives. To have an open democracy, vested in the voice of all of the people as a voice to having control as to what paths we build to the future. An economy that builds a nation, not eat it, a government that listens to the will of the people and does not worry the most about how taxes on billionaires will affect their careers. It is time to see this change we must build for the health of America, much as the critical path used in building a structure. Because in fact, we are building a nation, the structure of a nation. This is the time to see our journey forward as one of nation building. To destroy cancer that is destroying us by building new and better cells faster than they can destroy them. Let us again be those that dare, those that build, and those that reach the stars. We become the builders of starships, not by only technology, because if society cannot sustain advancement, technology will fail. No, by building a society that can sustain and last long enough to create the solutions needed to build starships. We build, they destroy. That is how we let them beat themselves.